Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. For more than a century and a half, we have been known as a city of immigrants, one where arrivals in America established their beachhead in search of the American dream. But that dream has been a nightmare for many who arrived here without the proper documents or overstated paperwork needed to be in the country legally. What to do with those undocumented residents of our city and nation, including children brought here at a very young age who are as American as anyone except for those documents, remains one of the most contentious issues in our political debate, fueling a Tea Party insurgency on the right and calls for an end to deportation and expanded rights for the undocumented on the left. Most recently, the focus has been on the DREAM Act, which would provide a path to legal status and eventual citizenship for youngsters brought by undocumented parents. The DREAM Act has stalled in the poisoned partisan atmosphere down in Washington, while a state equivalent that would make so-called dreamers eligible for in-state tuition has been tied up in the drama of the state Senate's power-sharing arrangements. Even as the federal government under Barack Obama deports undocumented in unprecedented numbers, New York is among those jurisdictions that does what it can to protect those who have not run afoul of criminal law other than laws linked to their immigration status. A city policy dating back to Mayor Koch of non-cooperation with federal authorities has been overruled in federal laws such as the Secure Communities Act, but we still do what we can to evade what appears to many in this city as harsh and unworkable. Now Mayor de Blasio is urging the creation of a city-issued identification card for undocumented immigrants that would allow them access to the array of services available to citizens and legal residents. Similarly, there are proposals to allow undocumented New Yorkers to vote in non-federal elections, something which may or may not require action from Albany. What are we to do when what seems a majority of city residents support rational and humane policy to help more than 100,000 fellow New Yorkers without documentation live with the law and with the national backlashes against illegal immigration? We're here to talk with four New Yorkers who take part in that debate. Carolina Gonzalez is a veteran journalist who's written extensively on immigration-related topics for newspapers and radio. Heather McDonald is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Els DeGraw is a political science professor at Baruch College. And Alan Wernick is the director of Citizenship now at CUNY and the chief immigration advice columnist at the Daily News. Els, let me begin with you.
Sure.
You see the debate that's going on. Do you view undocumented people as caught in the middle of that debate? Are they active players in that debate? Kind of set the moment.
I think both. You know, you probably all have heard of the Dreamers, which are the young undocumented students who've been very active in shaping the debate and pushing for particular policies, the DREAM Act you talked about. So in that sense, they're actively part of the debate. But there's also undocumented immigrants who maybe are a little older, are not part of this movement, and in that sense, they are caught up in the debate. So I think you have a little bit of both going on.
Alan, you've one of your jobs is to look at this law. Are there loopholes? Are there loopholes that have been closed? How does New York City try to get around these? Get around what seems to me a law that is not conducive to what New York City tries to do?
Well, I think get around and loopholes is a little bit judgmental, but I put it this way. In New York City, and particularly at the City University, we do everything we can to be welcoming to immigrants with papers and without papers. For instance, in CUNY, we have CUNY lobbied for and was successful in getting the New York State Legislature to allow undocumented students to pay in-state tuition. We're very optimistic that within either this year or next year or the year after, the state legislature will allow undocumented students to go to public universities, SUNY and CUNY, and get financial aid to do that.
And be treated as if they're in-state, if they live in New York State.
If you graduate from a New York State high school and you've attended that high school for 2 years, or you've passed a New York State GED exam, you're treated as in-state for tuition purposes. Of course, in terms of the financial aid, there are a number of states that already have that. For instance, Texas. I always like to talk about Texas. People see that as a red state, conservative state, but they allow undocumented students to get state financial aid. Also in New York City, We do have a policy, as you mentioned, that discourages, what some would say prohibits, city officials from using a person's reporting a person's immigration status to the authorities, and I think that's pretty much well carried out. Unless a person commits a serious crime, it's unlikely that a city government agent would refer them, and that's an important point because people should not be afraid to go to public hospitals, go to public schools, and take advantage of public services that are provided
or even report a crime.
Or even report a crime, certainly. And in fact, the New York City Police have been quite, I would say, active, more than in some cities, in reaching out to the immigrant community, including the undocumented community, to assure them that if they report a crime, it will not result in their getting turned into federal immigration authorities.
Heather, you've written about the what you call kind of the open borders lobby, and it seems to me, and this is I'm kind of observing as opposed to expressing an opinion, that we are trying to get around existing law.
Well, absolutely. The federal government has a program called the Secure Communities Program, which seeks to allow the federal immigration authorities, now known as ICE after being called the INS, to be notified if a undocumented alien or an illegal alien is booked into a jail, and will notify ICE so that ICE can decide whether they want to ask the jail to hold on to that person in order to initiate deportation proceedings. This, to me, is a no-brainer program. The person is there because of a crime, and the New York City, as well as many other localities around the country, are now refusing to comply with the so-called detainer request that ICE is making. New York City is now turning down 37% of all detainer requests, and they've carved out massive categories of people that they're saying we're simply not even going to notify you about. These are not petty criminals, these are people with misdemeanor convictions. And I find it ironic because when Arizona passed a law several years ago that simply stated the fact that local law enforcement had the right to inquire if they had reasonable suspicion to think that somebody was in the country illegally, to ask about their status, that was viewed as a massive constitutional violation of not acceding to federal authority. This was seen as a state trying to carve out its own area of law.
I want to get to
no,
Carolina,
it was seen as a conflict of interest.
I think the objection was that they were asking the local authorities to actually usurp federal authority. It's different than asking them to cooperate than to saying that take it on your own in order to act as a federal immigration authority.
No, it was seen as a conflict of laws, and that they were trying to set themselves up as sovereign. This is the same situation here, where you have the federal government asking for cooperation and the localities saying we're not going to honor your request. The rule in the Arizona case was that immigration is a federal matter. Mm-hmm. It is not a local matter. Now we have turned that around and saying we're making up our own immigration policy.
Well, I think that's true. I think that's an important point. And let me go to Carolina on this. I mean, the politics of this is not, and it's is that because we are in New York City, we're I mean, my grandparents came here as immigrants in, around 1910 and 1915, would not be able to come to this country today. It's inconceivable that we would do something other than protect tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I don't know what the number is of undocumented New Yorkers, but yet you see when in the most recent state poll, you had upstate people were opposed to the DREAM Act. Downstate people were strongly for. I mean, how much of this is taking place within a political framework?
Well, I mean, what I would say is that if you look at that poll, one of the things that tipped one of the splits that you got to look at isn't just upstate and downstate, but also Republican and Democrat, because Democrats were slightly in favor of the DREAM Act. I wouldn't say that it was like a huge percentage. It was I think it was like a 10-point spread. But when you looked at Republicans, I think it was 81-14 against. So that's what ended up making the numbers overall. more against. But what I would say is that, and I think Heather would actually agree with me on this, and I think we would all agree on this, is that one of the reasons we get into all these binds about who should be doing what level of enforcement and what counts as deportable offenses is because we do not have any clarity at the federal level. And we have not straightened out what constitutes, ways of coming into the country legally if you want to come to work. We've kind of one of the big areas that we end up not talking about is, let's say there are employers that want to hire people, and for whatever reason they want to claim, or they want to make the case that their best bet is to have workers come in from other countries temporarily, and there's a lot of industries where this is the case. It's very difficult for a number of industries to have workers come in for a season or for a couple of years and then go back. And
it's actually more than just agriculture.
I wasn't just saying,
right,
it's not just agriculture.
Traditionally, that was I lived in Florida for a while, and they brought all the Jamaican, I think were the HB1 workers, they brought them up.
H1A.
H1A to work, workers to work in the fields. Of course, there you in essence, the employer became an immigration agent, because if the employer controlled not only your pay and where you lived, because in the case of agricultural workers, they provided housing as well. But if you acted up, the employer could have you tossed out of the country.
But I agree with Carolina that certainly maybe in agricultural areas, there's a need for more visas. But what I find ironic in this debate as well is that if you care about income inequality, which I think probably a lot of people in this room do, bringing in more low-skilled immigrants is competing directly with low-skilled Americans. George Borjas at Harvard has estimated that since 1980, the entry of unskilled immigrants has lowered the wages of unskilled Americans by 5 to 10%.
That's been a traditional
especially
organized
Black
labor
Americans.
argument. That's been
And
a
it is
traditional
also,
organized labor argument,
and it also
which has in
lowers,
fact changed as organized
because
labor.
they'd rather have the politics. They care more about the politics of support for big government than they would about the actual effect on workers. And Black Americans are hurt the most by this. And it also affects existing immigrants. The new arrival of unskilled immigrants, mostly illegal, drives down the wages by 6%. So why we want to keep flooding in the unskilled? I would say let's bring in more skilled workers who are paying more in taxes than they're taking out in government services. That's reversed with unskilled immigrants. They are absorbing about 3 times as much in government services as they're paying in taxes.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
No, please.
Well, there's lots of research out there trying to figure out what exactly the cost and benefits of immigration is. There's arguments like this, that low-skilled immigrants drive down wages, particularly for folks that they would be competing with on the same level, often African Americans. But there's also people that say, well, there's actually, known, unknown, or not often discussed, economic benefits to immigration. They could range from immigrants who do pay taxes even when they're undocumented, if that's sales taxes, sometimes even income tax, to immigrants starting new businesses, which attracts and creates more jobs. So I think we have to kind of open up the debate. It's not just about them taking jobs and increasing competition among the lower educated, but there's also other aspects that we need to keep in mind, and I think that's kind of what we're bringing here.
But let me just, I'd like to bring another perspective. I understand, I'm not an economist, and I understand there are different studies with different points of view, and I'm not saying that the study that you suggested, Heather, is wrong, but I think we have to take a different perspective on it. For 2 decades, we basically, the Border Patrol sitting eating donuts and drinking coffee, and the employers are standing at the border saying, come on down. And we bring in hundreds of thousands, millions of workers from developing countries. And they are working like I met some people in California in the wine industry. They said, well, if it wasn't for these workers in California, the wine industry would have to close down. So we bring these people in. Then we get hit with a recession. Unemployment goes up. And all of a sudden we say, these people are taking our jobs. These people are terrible. Well, when we invited them in, We needed them because the economy was booming, because there was opportunity. And now that the economy is going well, we're going to say, okay, just like an old shoe, we're going to throw you back. You know, there's a certain sense of justice and morality here. Then you have to also think about what is going to happen to this country, like, you know, like in the comedy movie, you know, A Day Without Mexicans. What are the alternative opportunities for our nation in terms of building our economy going forward? How do we deal with the fact that there's millions of undocumented people here, and what is the best thing to do to take advantage of that situation, because it is what it is, and move forward with it and build on it? And you know, when I read the Senate bill, the proposed legislation that passed the Senate on immigration reform, the one thing I thought of, I said, you know what, I may actually have a strong retirement after all, because this bill could do so much for our economy. And do you agree with it? Do you disagree? Do you think the Senate bill is good for our economy? Because a lot of economists say that it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Senate bill did not do enough to move our immigration system away from family reunification as a principle and towards skills and language, like Canada, Australia,
But what
Britain
about
does,
what about the way
because
that was
that's we need to be competing with China and India for engineering talent. That's where future global success is going to reside. And right now, with our emphasis on really 65% of the legal immigration is family reunification, which is blind to skills, we still have a population that is not contributing fiscally on taxes to the extent that they're taking in services. As far as undocumented...
But isn't part of the reason that they're not contributing, as you say, at a higher level is because they are so limited in...
And living in the shadows.
No,
in where they can work?
unskilled legal immigrants actually consume even more in government services than illegal, because it's true, because they're eligible for more welfare programs. Right now, illegal aliens are getting welfare mostly through their children, and then public health services.
That's not to them. That's to their children.
If they
who are
become legal,
eligible
they're going to be. If they become legal in 13 years, they're going to be eligible for more welfare problems. The problem is their skill level. It's not their nationality. It's that all Americans who are low skilled end up being net consumers of government services. So I think what we need to do is start thinking about bringing in people that pay more in taxes than they consume. And that hasn't been talked about enough. We all are obsessed about the problem of what to do with illegal aliens. I think the more important thing is really getting a hold on what is the best for our economy in the future.
I thought the Senate bill was quite generous to people with college degrees and professionals. I mean, to me, I talked to all the people I know who are immigration lawyers. They're looking to expand their businesses. There's going to be so much work. It really made it much easier for people with master's degrees, particularly in the sciences. I mean, it seemed like there was a tremendous opportunity and opening for people who had college degrees and advanced degrees to come to the United States. It took a lot of the obstacles that exist. It increased the numbers. I don't go into all the details about it, but it seemed very, very generous to me. You don't think it was? Not generous enough? I mean, I'm sorry.
One of the points of the House of the House Republican proposal, which has not been voted on because they can't seem to vote on anything, was to create two classes, that there was a process of legalization but not a process of citizenship. So, in essence, saying, okay, we got these 11 million people here. What are we going to do? We can't deport them all, but so we should create, if they pay a fine and they can speak English, and there's all these kind of steps that would have to be taken, that they would create a path to legalization but not to citizenship. Is that, and partly that's because people feel that the vast majority of those people would probably be voting Democrats, and you have a Republican House of Representatives that's trying to make this decision.
That's part of it, but it also reflects the reality. 43% of Hispanic legal immigrants who are eligible to become citizens, only 43% naturalized. Most people don't. So we all think that, people come here because they want to become American citizens. That's not true. They do come here, as Alan says,
and we're not talking about those. We're talking about 11 million people who are here illegally.
Actually, what I would say is that there have been polls that indicate that there is a notable segment of the the non-citizen immigrant population. I don't think this poll distinguished between people who were legal residents and undocumented, but that if there was an option to live here legally and not necessarily have access to citizenship, that a lot of people actually would be, yeah, that's
Right,
fine. If
that's
I can,
exactly-
I agree.
if I can live here and I
Yeah.
can work and I can do whatever it is that I need to do, that's okay.
Yeah, they don't want citizenship.
Well, I
It
wouldn't
should
say
be
that
a
they
choice.
don't.
It should
Want
be a
citizenship,
choice.
That's not
But
what the
their
poll said.
priority is legalization. It's
Well,
not citizenship.
but wait. That's right. But if you look at the poll, of course, if you ask somebody, if you have two choices. You're going to be deported, or we can make you, or we can make you legal. Which is more important? Or we can make you a citizenship, but you might not be able to be a citizen. If you had to choose between being deported and becoming a citizen, what would you choose? I mean, I don't think it's a fair poll. But let me just say,
I don't think that
even
was a
even
poll
even
to
if I mean, I'm comfortable with the idea that those of us who support immigrant empowerment and immigrants' rights may have to accept a program that only allows people to have legal status and not have a path to citizenship through the new legislation. But it seems to me that there needs to be at least an opportunity for these people to through our current system or through some minor modifications to become U.S. citizens. Do we really want, I don't know if you support this, do you really want a permanent class of people who never ever, by virtue of their status, which is some of the Republicans are proposing, that if you sign up for this legalization program, you can get your driver's license, you can get employment authorization, you can travel, but never ever, by virtue of having signed up for this, can you ever become a U.S. citizen? I don't think that's a very satisfactory way for a society to live. I mean, do you really want people, do you want to have millions of people running around America who have no ability to become, firefighters, police officers, officers in the military?
Or vote.
Or vote.
Just have input in the community.
So they're going to
yeah.
be sidelined like that? Is that, you don't
Well-
support that, or do you?
People came here voluntarily, leaving aside the dreamers, which is a different category and probably the most compelling.
I mean, is it good for society? I mean, is it good for you and me? Whether it's good for them or not is a separate question. But I'm asking you,
I
is it
think
good
the
for you
rule
and
of
me?
law is a good thing. I think that
Laws change.
the concept of national sovereignty is a good thing, that we have the right to make laws about the borders as every other country does. Mexico is absolutely
that's not what we're
ruthless
talking
about illegal.
about.
Yes, we are.
But it's
we are
also-
talking
but that's
about
also changed over
people that have
time.
come here illegally. What is their claim on citizenship? I don't think it's very big. This is a one-shot. Their children, if they're born here, are citizens. I would say giving them legalization is more than they expected when they came here and is already a lot. And they are going to age out. We all die. This is a generation that has come here illegally. I think that is a valid compromise. Unless you're assuming that we are going to continue to get more and more waves of illegal aliens, which we well might if we continue to have these magnets and these efforts to dissolve the distinction between legal and illegal, then it's a recurring problem. But if it's a one shot, I think it is in fact something that we can live with, because otherwise what I see is a constant effort to absolutely dissolve the distinction between legal and illegal.
But
We're obviously
that's
not
a
gonna- you
distinction that's a historical distinction, frankly, because when even as relatively recently as when my parents came here, becoming here and transitioning from arriving here with a visa and then getting legal permission to stay in the country and then becoming a legal resident and then becoming a citizen was a much easier process than it is now. My parents also could not have come here today the same way that they came about 40 or 50 years ago. So this idea, and if you look at generations of immigrants, that generation of immigrants that we always love to talk about as being, the correct immigrants, the good immigrants, a lot of them did not want, a lot of them also did not want to become citizens and never became citizens, frankly. A lot of them also never gave up their language, never gave up their culture, and yet that was fine. It was fine because they were considered to be contributing members of society, even if they weren't professionals, even if they weren't engineers, even if they weren't doctors. So that notion of somebody coming here and being seen as a threat to the comedy, that's a relatively new concept. That basically dates to probably about 30 years. Like
We
that's
had
not that
a
long
we
time.
had a
That's
very
one generation.
significant immigration pause in the 1920s that halted the flow of new arrivals and forced people to assimilate. We also believed in the concept of assimilation in a way that we don't now.
We also
Now
had
it
the
is seen
Chinese, we also
as
had the
oppressive.
Chinese Exclusion Acts. We had
But in the 1920s,
ethnically based categories of
you
people we
didn't
would
have
take and not take.
a single sending country like Mexico, which overwhelms all other numbers, that is contiguous to our border.
In fact,
and
during the
makes it
economic
much harder to
downturn,
assimilate.
you've seen a
So the problem is
significant
that
number of
it's
people going
Mexicans that are
back.
coming? Is that the problem?
As far as the illegal alien population, they are the overwhelming source.
No,
and
that's
it makes
a
it
numbers
harder
fact,
to
but
assimilate.
that's a numbers fact, but that's not a fact about process and what happens.
But our rules are what they are now. There's lots of people who come here legally. They do wait 10 years. And it's an insult to those people who have gone through and obeyed our rules to say that those who have jumped the queue now get automatic legal status. But I would like to just ask the panel, because there is an ongoing crusade now to delegitimate the concept of deportation. So if somebody does come here illegally, you can say that we shouldn't have any rules, perhaps, for who comes in or not. Maybe it should be totally open. But for the while, we do have categories and rules for coming in. If somebody violates those laws, what should the consequences be?
Well, I think it seems
Same
to me there's
consequences for any civil violation. I mean, it's like,
You pay a fine?
yeah, why not?
So
Well-
in that case, that becomes, so then there is really no distinction of legal and illegal. That just becomes the cost of entry.
but the idea
So you
of
come
I
in,
think
come
that
in illegal and you pay a
delegitimating- I
fine.
think
Everybody's going to pay a fine then. So
I-
anybody comes in illegally.
I think to twist it, I mean, to make the debate, to make the central debate of the current epoch, the delegitimation of deportation, is to really create a false
Straw man.
issue, a straw man. I mean,
Really,
I understand.
Obama's
Wait.
announcing
that
this.
there are lots of people in the United States who I believe would benefit from the kind of program that the president created for the Dreamers, adults who would benefit from that program. And in the absence of congressional action to create that benefit, which I know you don't agree with it, but for those of us who think that it would make
I haven't
sense for these
expressed an
people.
opinion on the DREAM Act.
Right.
No, not on the DREAM Act. No, I said about the adults. I'm saying there's a group of people who are productive, who we could create categories for, who are here unlawfully, who we could give legal status to, employment authorization, and driver's license, travel permission, that we could do administratively, and it would be great for our country. And so if Congress doesn't do that, there's no reason why the president, through executive action, can't do it. And that is not to delegitimize deportation. That is not to say that certain people shouldn't be deported. It's to say that certain people meet certain criteria, which we can debate, how many years you have been here, whether you have certain job skills. For instance, just as an example, there's a nanny crisis in New York. Why? Because back in the day when I first started practicing law, somebody came in and they were a live-in household worker taking care of a young child. I could get them a green card. Now I cannot. So you have these people, they're working on, why not give the nannies, for instance, as just an example, why not give them employment authorization, a driver's license, and travel permission? Why is that delegitimizing the deportation? That is not. And so I think you really are creating a straw man. There are people who, you can find somebody that believes in anything. There are people that believe in open borders. There are people that think that drug dealers should not be deported. But that's not to me, that's not a mainstream argument. It's not an argument I agree with. And the argument that I think people who are supporting this ending of deportation by Obama, which I think you're referring to, are people who are looking at certain categories of individuals, people who have not committed crimes, people who have family ties here, for instance, the parents of the Dreamers. Why shouldn't the parents? So the Dreamer has employment authorization. He or she has a work permission. He or she can travel home, but their parents can't. I mean,
That's an amazing bootstrap to me. That
Why
they haven't
not?
gone for. Because if we're
What's the
reversing
harm?
the logic,
But what's
the logic
bad about
was,
it?
the logic
bad
was,
about it is it's violating the law.
the logic for the DREAM Act
rewarding
is
lawlessness,
that
right?
the parents came here deliberately and knowingly,
Yes.
illegally, but their children had no role in that. So we give the children legal status, who then turn around and confer legal status on their parents. that's just a complete reversal of the original logic.
No, but it's not. But we're not
But
bootstrapping.
to say that there isn't a campaign against deportation, there's signs at every rally
No,
now.
no.
End deportations now across the board.
Yes.
And the exclusion categories include people with misdemeanor offenses, 2 misdemeanor offenses. It takes a lot to get misdemeanor convictions at this point, given the.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. People are pled down all the time. But we have an African American unemployment rate in this city that is very high.
You know,
So are there
I
not-
actually
are there
really
not jobs
resent.
available?
I actually really resent the constant bringing up of, you know, immigrants versus African Americans. First of all, there are Black people who are immigrants, so like these categories are not mutually exclusive. And the idea that that the way that we're going to argue about what happens to immigrants based on what happens. The conditions of African Americans, I actually find kind of insulting.
Because remember, because this is not necessarily,
Because it's not a zero-sum game, though. It's not.
It's not.
we do have
That's
a situation.
supply and demand of
We do
labor.
have a situation in which a lot of focus is on Latinos, but in this city in particular, Dominicans being the largest. I remember when I used to cover the census, you know, 30 years ago, it was Blacks, Hispanics, and non-Hispanic whites, and Hispanics meant Puerto Ricans, and all of a sudden, when you had the mammoth Dominican influx, politics changed, because for Puerto Ricans, immigration is not an issue. For Dominicans, immigration is an issue. But to talk about Blacks versus immigrants is and not to take into consideration the vast Caribbean, whether it's English-speaking Caribbean or Haitian, to talk about the mammoth African immigration that we're seeing now into parts of the Bronx and parts of, you know, and parts of Upper Manhattan, parts of Brooklyn. I think that I kind of empathize with.
Well, Bob, let me
Carolina's
just say, I mean, Heather, I feel like there's a little bit of unfairness here in terms of like, I sort of feel like you're being ganged up on, and I certainly don't want to do that. Here's my problem, though, with this paradigm about unemployment and the impact of foreign labor coming to the United States, legal or unlawful. It seems to me that in a global economy, when I make a phone call, when I need help with my computer and the person's from the Philippines, I always ask people, where are you? And they're, you know, I'm in the Philippines. Or when I know that, when I read that X-rays are being read, you know, in Europe, when I know a lawyer who has a law firm in India, who does all the immigration law work for his law firm. What concerns me is that if we don't, I understand that, let's say it's accurate that an influx of foreign labor depresses wages in the United States. Let's take that as a given. The question, that's not really the question, is it? The question is, would it be more depressed if we have a more restrictionist policy, or will it be less depressed? That's really what the debate to me is about, and I just don't get it. I asked somebody who is a union leader, and her company, I mean her workers that she leads, wash laundry in like big laundry centers outside of hotels in Nevada. And I said, well, at what price point would it be cheaper for the company that's sending the laundry to your shops to send the laundry to Mexico and have it laundered there? She said, we've passed that price point. She said, there's all kinds of legal restrictions and we can't do it. Well, we've already passed that price point. So the question is are the workers in Nevada who are doing this laundry, yes, their labor may be depressed if more workers come from Mexico, but if the labor goes to Mexico, they're going to have no jobs at all. And that's, of course, what happened to the garment industry in New York. I mean, there's no garment industry in New York. And it's not because foreign labor depressed the wages so much, right? There was a lot of undocumented labor in the garment industry. But that's not what destroyed the garment industry, right? So, I don't want to, I know you have expertise in this area. Explain it to me. Explain to me how keeping those foreign workers out is going to help the garment industry in New York. You see what I'm saying? Am I missing something here?
Well, there's some jobs that are not exportable, such as the service economy.
So far. I mean, so we have these self-wash toilets. I mean,
okay.
No, pretty soon, I'm serious. Pretty soon we'll go to a hotel, you'll close it, you'll leave the hotel, and a manager will come in, press a button, and the bathroom will be clean.
Mm-hmm. Cesar Chavez opposed illegal immigration because he felt that it drove down wages for his workers. And as you say, unions traditionally took that position. Now they've reversed. It's just a simple law of supply and demand. So, you know, these days we're all about
Well, no,
raising wages
I think
for
one of the
low-skilled workers.
I think that one of the
One way to
reasons-
do that would be to increase the bargaining power of workers, which would be to lower competition. I mean, the New York Times just had an article about, you know, the effort to enforce labor laws. And there was an immigrant restaurant worker who said, my employer, you know, refused to go along with the Health Care Leave Act. She goes, I can just get other immigrants that are going to come in for cheaper labor. They're willing to
Well,
put
I
up with it.
think that the
So-
reason that unions flipped on this issue is because they saw that the exploitation of immigrant workers, of undocumented workers, was in fact bleeding into mistreatment of their members and of documented workers, both citizens and legal. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was hoping that we could we've been talking a lot about the depressing factors that are sometimes discussed in conjunction with immigration, but immigrants also bring a lot of good, particularly to New York City. I was hoping that we could kind of
Speaking as an
emphasize.
immigrant, yes.
Well, I'm an immigrant myself, of course, and I think that also kind of comes through. But in New York City, you know, we remain a vibrant city if you just look at demographics, population-wise, and in large part that is because of immigration. You know, we don't want to end up like Detroit, and I think Detroit now is saying we want immigrants because they can probably revitalize our economy. So I think we also want to look at the flip side. I think we in New York benefit tremendously. We remain vibrant because of immigrants, and I think city officials recognize that, Albany officials recognize that, because they're coming up with all kinds of programs to have immigrants more actively engage with the community. Municipal ID cards, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, is one way that they want to do this. We have a linguistically accessible government. We want to reach out to immigrants. We want immigrants to interact with a variety of city officials. So anyway, I think we want to also bring that to the fore.
And I would agree with Elsa. We've seen this in South Central LA as well, that a lot of immigrants there have stabilized what was extraordinarily gang-ridden and violent community.
Yes, sir. Tell us your name and your campus, please.
My name is Dmitry, a student at John Jay College. So my question regards more local issues. So it's been talking about immigration issues on a national government, but my question regards New York City. So given the precedent in New Haven, Connecticut, that they have since 2008, they have this municipal ID for undocumented residents, or undocumented people living in New Haven. So how likely is for New York City government to pass such an ordinance that would allow undocumented people to apply for such a municipal ID? And
Well, I think it's probably within the politics of this city.
and
I would
if
think it's
it
quite
passes,
likely.
if
They're
it
working on it.
passes,
Yeah.
I mean, from your point of view, would it really benefit people? Like, would undocumented people start reporting crimes, as
I
you
think they're doing it
mentioned?
now. I mean,
as
I
you
think-
mentioned it as an issue. Thanks.
Alan, do you
Go
know what because I'm not that familiar with like what the municipal ID is going to cover, or
Oh, yeah, I've done quite a bit of research
Sure,
on this topic,
please.
and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So New Haven started this program in 2007. Other cities have followed suit: San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oakland, Richmond, and a couple of New Jersey municipalities. There's only anecdotal evidence, I have to say, with regard to New Haven in terms of the connection between municipal ID cards and lowering crime. So immigrants haven't, and by the way, I want to just correct that it's not just a card for immigrants. Municipal ID cards are for all city residents, but of course, undocumented immigrants are one of the primary beneficiaries from that program. But there's some anecdotal evidence, and the police officials in New Haven will say that crime has gone down since this program started. Of course, you know, to what extent is there really a causal effect going on? And it's anecdotal evidence, but another, I think, benefit of those programs is that immigrants feel more included, not just when it comes to interacting with the police, but also just being part of the community. So it has symbolic significance. But these cards, I think, are tremendously important in opening access to city life, because it's not just about interacting with police, it's also about people being able to open bank accounts. They can use the card as a prepaid debit card, so you can use the card to pay for like parking meters. There's talk about turning them into public transportation cards. So I think there's a lot of potential, and they're working on legislation here in New York City right now. Councilmember Menchaca is working on this legislation. There should be a hearing sometime soon in City Council about this.
One of the questions I've always had is because we have a policy of non-cooperation, essentially, on certainly on something below a felony, something or absent some serious crime. Under a different political environment, what would stop the feds from coming and enforcing us to open up that list?
Well, it depends on how you design the program. So this happened in New Haven, where some immigration opponents submitted FOIA requests, and they wanted the list of names of people that were going to apply for the card. They didn't get that information. In San Francisco, it's very secure. The city retains no information of card applicants, so you can FOIA all you want. There's nothing they can get.
It's just that always the idea of a national ID card has always been a civil liberties.
It's all about the implementation of these programs.
And I think in Oakland, the way that they did it is that because it was tied,
debit card.
it was tied to debit cards, and the entity that handles it is out of state, then it just kind of put, a little bit of a barrier.
Yes, sir. Your name and your campus, please.
Hi, my name is Georg, and I'm from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. My question is addressed to Peter McDonald. You said that you don't mind if more skillful people come to this country because we have a demand for skillful jobs. And my question is, do you think it will not create the second revolving door, which was as a result of mass importation and deportation back in 1930s when the Depression started, and then after post-World War II, when we needed labor as a demand from agriculturers? Don't you think it will create the same thing? People will come as a skillful people, and then with the rules that we imply, that we enact certain policies, will create another big mass like illegal immigration? Thank you.
Your question was, if we move towards a skilled-based system,
Yes.
would that result in people leaving if our economy
Now,
gets
Lewin,
more
when we bring
depressed?
a lot of skillful people, and we brought low skillful people when we needed back during World War II, we brought these people here. There was a result why these Mexicans came here. They didn't just decide to come. We created the policies that opened the border for Mexicans because there was a demand in agriculture. So we brought these people here, and then all of a sudden, whatever the policies were, these people couldn't become citizens, and then they kept coming and coming. It's like a structural illegal immigration. It's not just immigration. It has a history why it happened. So what if we bring a lot of skillful people? Is it possible it will create another revolving door that will create a big mass?
I mean, to put it another way is, if you bring in skilled immigration, would that require a path to citizenship for them?
Well, I would bring in skilled people through legal channels.
With a path to
Yes, and
citizenship.
then they're going to bring
Yes,
their,
they
then they're
come
gonna
in
get
and
citi-
with- as legal-
Then they're going to bring their mother here, and their mother, because they're U.S. citizens, they're going to bring their mother here, and their mother's going to say, well, my sister needs to come, I can't be here. And let me tell you,
That's the principle of family reunification.
yes, but if you don't,
I would cut back on that.
yes, but if you don't let the scientist bring his or her spouse or partner or brother, sister, or mother, they're going to go to Australia or Canada. They're not going to come here. Why should they come here?
Australia and Canada doesn't use a family reunification. They're going to Australia and Canada now because they are admitted on the basis of a point system, and it gives credit for English language and educational attainment.
And family
and they're coming.
And
They're
family
coming.
relationships.
But the
Not as
cornerstone
much
of
as
family reunification.
Wait, the point system doesn't allow family relationships in the point system in these countries?
It's very heavily weighted towards skills. That's how it's distinguished from ours. So, again, I would say let the competition begin at the high skill level. I think people there are, but I'm worried about the low end in this country, that people that are struggling, and I think it is in our national interest to make choices as to who we let in, and based on whether they're going to be on the fiscal side of, again, consumers of government services, are they going to be paying more in or taking more out?
All the studies I've seen have shown that immigration is a net economic plus.
Right, but it conflates the two. If you look only at low-skilled, taxpayers end up paying more. High-skilled immigrants, without question, contribute more. Everybody talks about Sergey Brin, but he's not
I
necessarily
don't think Sergey
emblematic.
Brin is exactly, I don't know of how many are multi-billion.
But he's what's referred to as the job creator, paradigm immigrant, and his parents were mathematicians in Russia, so it was a pretty good
I would say
bet.
that he's a rather idiosyncratic.
Well, then let's not
Immigrant.
invoke him anymore.
But
I'd
they're
not
be happy
invoking
to.
him.
Well, people
Look,
do.
there are a lot of small store owners in New York who are job creators who
Yeah.
are undocumented or recent immigrants, restaurateurs who, same thing.
Okay,
So,
on average.
huh?
On average, though, on average, there's lots of, obviously,
Yes.
there's a huge amount of energy, goodwill, and extraordinary work ethic. But the data is the data. On average, people who come with an 8th grade education are not the major source of
But
job
their
creation.
kids may be producing
No,
a great
no,
deal
that's-
of wealth.
Yeah, well, that's not
We're seeing
surprising.
third generation
Americans
stall.
who have an 8th grade education probably are
Among
taking more.
low-skilled immigrants, they close the gap in the 2nd generation, and then third, it opens up again. This is Alejandro Portes's
No,
research. This is not the Manhattan Institute exclusively.
I'm just I understand.
What we're seeing is a move into some underclass traits in the 2nd and 3rd
Let me
generation.
ask you one quick question before I
Sure.
go back. Is Els was talking about the ID card, since you seem to be kind of arguing your points. Do you agree that the city should create a municipal ID card with the goal of providing some degree of, if not legalization, regularization to undocumented immigrants in this city?
I'm uncomfortable with the idea because it seems to me, again, this amazing carve-out that localities are asserting with regards to federal immigration
Having said
policy.
that, just very quickly, and this is unfair to ask you for a yes or no answer, can we deport 11 million people in order and
No, we
start all over
cannot.
again?
No, we absolutely cannot deport 11 million.
Can I just
Yes,
say that
yes.
quickly that
Yes.
these ID cards have nothing to do with immigration powers? I mean, the cities that issue these cards, they at no point will ask people like, what is your immigration status? I think cities have been very smart about making sure that these cards are about civic engagement, public health, public safety for all city residents. And they're not singling out immigrants as just the only beneficiary population.
Yes, sir, your name and your campus.
How you doing? My name is Davon Norris, and I'm from Brooklyn College. And my question is, due to the fact that America is the land of immigrants, doesn't not supporting the DREAM Act deface the belief that the U.S. is the land of opportunity when the opportunity isn't equal for everyone? Yeah.
Who wants to, I mean, he's kind of making an ethical and a moral argument, especially insofar as it applies to dreamers.
Well, we haven't heard anyone here say that they're against the DREAM Act. Are we all for the DREAM Act?
Yeah, I think there's a strong argument that people who are brought here illegally should have some kind
Because
of regularization
it's fundamentally a
status.
moral argument, not an economic argument, right?
Or a legal argument.
Well, I'm just asking, is it a more? I ask this because, you know, to me, like I said, the economy, the economic data and studies a little bit above my ability to comprehend. But the two things that drive my analysis of immigration policy are the moral question, which I don't think just applies to young people. I mean, there were people, like I said, who were basically invited into this country to work, were given basically free reins at the borders, and now when things are tough, we want to push them back. And then there's the long-term historical economic concern that I have about the fact that I'm buying tomatoes from Holland, I'm buying raspberries from Chile, and I'm worried about all of our jobs, except for, you know, restaurant cooks going abroad. And even restaurant cooks, you know, one of the restaurateurs that I know who's undocumented owns 6 restaurants. The way he manages his restaurants, he has all the food produced in one, and he ships it around the city every couple of hours. There's no reason why that can't happen from Mexico and other countries as well. So I'm just worried about sort of so those are the two things that I'm concerned about. So if you are willing to accept a moral consideration for the young people, why can't we expand that to a few other categories at least?
Because people came here deliberately breaking the law. I think that's an important distinction to maintain. Yes, we're the land of opportunity. We're also the land of the rule of law. And to me, that is an attribute of sovereignty. Other countries enforce this as well. This is not some
But look,
odd quirk on the United
But yet
States
you would not,
part.
but yet
Look,
you
And
would
I
not-
also
But yet
disagree.
you would not deport
You know,
11
in
million
New
people
York-
who are here against the law.
In New
I would
York,
not deport them. They cannot be deported, but I would not move forward in
So you would leave them
eviscerating
in
their
limbo.
distinction.
You would leave
For
them
the
in limbo.
present, I would, because their kids are here, but I would not further encourage other people to come here illegally
we're
by
talking
saying,
about the
once
11
you're
million
here,
people who are here.
we are going to confer benefits on you that you have jumped the queue that people who are waiting legally
So we
are
would
not
leave
getting.
them in limbo.
Yes,
Okay.
I would.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Elisa, John Jay College. Well, I would like to make a comment first. For example, I'm undocumented, and I came to this country 6 years ago without any English. Right now, I'm graduating this semester. And I really feel, for example, unfair that, like, you have to study, you have to work to maintain your living, and you don't have any opportunity. You can take a loan, you can't apply for financial aid, of course. Like scholarship may help if you're eligible for them. But,
And your
like,
question?
I'm sorry?
Your question? Your question.
My question is, why we're still talking about unskilled immigration if actually I can see from my point of view there's more immigrants have more ambitions and more will to study than actually Americans who really, as you said, they just
Well, that's
use,
the argument. That's a very American argument, if you will, is that in fact immigrants have, that if you're smart enough and resourceful enough to get here, then you have kind of the gumption, you kind of have the stuff we want, and you know, in the sense of your being able to make it here as an American. It's kind of an offshoot of the moral argument, Alan, that you've been making.
Well, I think it's been long known that the people that come to the United States to migrate any other country are not necessarily the poorest of the poorest or the folks that don't have skills. I mean, it takes quite some effort and energy and resources to come to the United States, in whatever means that is, right? Thank you. Where are you?
That's okay.
Okay.
Let me,
yeah.
you have 3 minutes. I
Oh.
want to get another question in.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michael. I'm from Lehman College. And there's been discussion of people coming into this country illegally, especially Mexicans. Now, NAFTA was created with the intention, to promote free trade and to spur the economies of North America. And I think one of the unintended consequences of NAFTA was the diminishing of Mexican opportunity in Mexico. So isn't it America's responsibility to kind of deal with those consequences, namely the influx of Mexican immigration?
You know, pardon me for being the economist, but as I understood NAFTA, that the idea of NAFTA was to create economic opportunity in Mexico, to keep Mexicans in Mexico, and in fact, and nobody has spoken about the threat from Canada, but we'll leave that for another show. But that in fact, after the 2008 recession, as the Great Recession hit, in fact, you saw job opportunities in this country dry up, and the illegal immigration, the immigration of undocumented people, in fact, went down because of the economy, because the jobs were not here, and in fact, you saw a flow going back. So I mean, there is a sense that the immigrants are following the jobs, and does anybody understand NAFTA differently than I do?
Well, I think there's research that has shown that there's been a lot of displacement within Mexico, particularly farmers who are being pushed to the big Mexican cities, not finding enough jobs, that then go to the border zones, to the maquiladoras, where they get a taste of what life is like in the United States, and then they cross the border. So I think there's something to be said about the question that was just raised. I think the U.S. has played a role when it comes to these kind of displacement mechanisms. It's not just in Mexico; it's also in other countries like Jamaica, where U.S. hasn't been investing in the economy.
No, and what I was just going to add very quickly was that if you notice, actually, the trends in migration to a lot of the newer centers of migration, they are all pretty much post-NAFTA. I mean, if you're going to talk about sort of like the sweeping, like the movement of people from Mexico and from Central America also.
Into Mexico.
No, into the into New York, into the South, into parts of the West, where they were, and the other thing that we didn't talk about really was the recruitment of a number of industries, like the meat packing industry, like the meat processing industries, that really pretty much set up these flows of labor from Mexico and Central America to a lot of these, centers of work in communities that were depressed and then that were revitalized by
Kind of what the mayor, or kind of what the people in Detroit are talking about.
Yeah.
But Postville, Iowa, that had like the biggest workplace rate in U.S. history, that town, the economy of that town went south. Forgive the geographical bad reference, but the economy of the town was completely depressed after the raid, because it didn't just take away a lot of the people who were earning and spending money in the community, but it also, it removed a lot of the people who were patronizing the businesses in the town.
Similar stories in Alabama. When Alabama adopted its very stringent anti-immigrant law, towns commenting on how their economies were being affected negatively because people were afraid to participate or just left.
Alan, we have 30 seconds left. How do you, and you're the lawyer in the bunch, how do you see this debate working itself out?
Well, I think it's going to be a few years before we see a national program that provides any major change in our immigration laws. I think it's likely to happen in a way that will grant legalization without a path to citizenship, but that it will not be something where people who get this legalization will be prohibited from becoming citizens. I think there won't be a new path, but there will be a path.
I have the goodbye sign. I always make deadline. I want to thank you all, and we'll see you next time on CUNY Forum. Thank you.